Why did God command the Israelites not to intermarry with their neighboring nations? Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 3 and 4. English Standard Version. You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons or taking their daughters for your sons, for they would turn away your sons from following me, to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly. Exploring the historical context and the reasons behind this commandment sheds light on its significance in preserving religious purity, safeguarding national identity and security, and preventing the influence of foreign gods and customs. In order to understand the religious and cultural significance of this command, it is important to consider the context in which it was given. The Israelites were a distinct and chosen people, set apart by God to be a holy nation, Exodus chapter 19 verses 5 and 6. They were called to worship and follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to live according to his commandments. Intermarriage with neighboring nations posed a significant threat to their religious purity and faithfulness to God. One of the primary reasons behind this commandment was to preserve the religious purity of the Israelites. The surrounding nations practiced polytheism, and their worship involved a multitude of gods and various rituals that were vastly different from the monotheistic worship of Yahweh by the Israelites. For the Israelites, their faith in Yahweh was of utmost importance. It was not simply a religious belief, but also a fundamental part of their identity as a chosen people. Their covenant with God required them to worship him alone and follow his commandments faithfully. Any deviation from this exclusive worship of Yahweh would not only dilute their faith, but also corrupt their spiritual heritage. Maintaining religious purity was crucial for the Israelites to carry out their role as God's chosen people. They were called to be a holy nation, separate from the practices and beliefs of the surrounding nations. By preserving their monotheistic faith, the Israelites were able to fully commit themselves to God's commandments and continue their spiritual legacy. Intermarriage with the neighboring nations posed a significant threat to this religious purity. When individuals from different cultures and faiths come together through marriage, it is natural for religious beliefs, traditions, and practices to blend. In the context of the Israelites, intermarriage would have introduced foreign gods, beliefs, and practices into their community. To prevent the dilution and corruption of their faith, the Israelites were commanded to avoid intermarriage with these neighboring nations. By maintaining religious purity, the Israelites could faithfully carry out their role as a chosen people. They could continue to live according to God's commandments, fulfilling their purpose as a light to the nations and a testament to Yahweh's faithfulness. Additionally, intermarriage with neighboring nations raised concerns about safeguarding the Israelites' national identity and security. The Israelites were not only a religious community but also a distinct ethnic group. The Israelites' cultural heritage was deeply intertwined with their religious beliefs. Their spiritual practices revolved around their worship of Yahweh, the God that had chosen them. They observed a plethora of religious festivals and rituals such as Passover, Sabbath, and the Feast of Tabernacles, which were not only religious but also deeply embedded in their cultural practices. Marrying into neighboring nations risked assimilation and loss of their unique cultural heritage. By preserving their cultural identity, the Israelites could maintain a collective sense of belonging, cohesion, and a shared national history. This would strengthen their bonds as a community and help protect them from external threats. Furthermore, this commandment aimed to prevent the influence of foreign gods and customs on the Israelites. The practices of neighboring nations often included idol worship, rituals, and values that were incompatible with the Israelite religious and ethical framework. God warned the Israelites multiple times about the dangers of idolatry and the consequences it would bring, Exodus chapter 34, verse 12 to 16, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 15 to 19. Idol worship was prevalent among the neighboring nations of Israel. These nations worshipped a multitude of deities, often connected to nature, fertility, and war. They practiced rituals that were considered abhorrent and unethical in the eyes of God. By prohibiting intermarriage, God was ensuring that the Israelites would not be tempted to participate in these idolatrous practices. By prohibiting intermarriage with these nations, God sought to protect his people from being swayed by the allure of foreign gods and adopting their customs. This ensured the purity and integrity of the Israelite faith, as well as protected them from the spiritual and moral pitfalls associated with idol worship. Disregarding this commandment would have had significant consequences for the Israelites. Throughout their history, the Israelites struggled with idolatry and the temptation to assimilate into the cultures of their neighbors. The examples of King Solomon and his foreign wives, who led him into idolatry, 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 1 to 13, and the later history of the northern kingdom of Israel, which was plagued by syncretism and foreign influences leading to their downfall, 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 6 to 23, demonstrate the dangers of intermarriage and the subsequent erosion of religious faith and national identity. Despite Solomon's wisdom and devotion to God in his early reign, he disregarded the commandment by marrying foreign women who led him into idolatry. These wives influenced him to worship their gods, causing him to build altars and high places for their false deities. Solomon's actions not only violated the commandment, but they also led the entire nation astray. The consequences of Solomon's disobedience were seen in the later history of the northern kingdom of Israel. This kingdom, made up of 10 tribes, fell into syncretism and foreign influences that slowly eroded their religious faith and national identity. The Israelites intermarried with neighboring nations, adopting their customs, traditions, and worship practices. This assimilation led to a dilution of their unique identity as God's chosen people. The combination of intermarriage and syncretism resulted in idol worship becoming rampant in the northern kingdom. The people began to worship foreign gods and abandoned the commandments of the Lord. This gradual departure from their religious heritage led to God's judgment upon them. The Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom, exiled its people, and assimilated them into their own culture. The Israelites' failure to uphold the commandment had dire consequences for their society, causing them to lose their homeland and be dispersed among foreign nations. The examples of Solomon and the northern kingdom of Israel clearly demonstrate the dangers of intermarriage and assimilation into foreign cultures. Through disobedience to the commandment, the Israelites not only jeopardized their relationship with God but also lost their national identity as a distinct people. In discussing the commandment prohibiting intermarriage, it is crucial to address the counterarguments that often emerge, which tend to focus on inclusiveness and tolerance. Critics argue that this commandment reflects a xenophobic or exclusionary attitude towards other cultures and faiths. While it is important to consider these perspectives, it is equally necessary to frame these commandments within their historical and covenantal context. The commandments given to the Israelites were not arbitrary rules aimed at promoting prejudice or discrimination. Instead, they were part of a larger plan to establish a distinct and holy people with a specific role and purpose in God's greater plan. The prohibition on intermarriage played a crucial role in fulfilling that purpose and safeguarding the integrity of their religious and cultural identity. It is important to understand that the Israelites were not chosen simply for their own benefit, but to be a light to the nations. They were to exemplify a unique relationship with God and serve as vessels through which His truth and righteousness would be shared with the rest of the world. Assimilation into other cultures and faiths through intermarriage would have compromised this mission, diluting their identity and message. It is essential to note that the commandment did not stem from a disdain for other cultures or an assertion of superiority. Rather, it was a protective measure designed to ensure their distinctiveness and to maintain their commitment to God's covenant. This commandment served as a reminder for the Israelites to remain faithful to their unique identity and to avoid compromising their values and beliefs by intermingling with other nations. Critics of this commandment often argue that it contradicts principles of inclusiveness and tolerance that are cherished in contemporary societies. However, it is necessary to acknowledge that the ancient Israelites operated within a specific historical and cultural context vastly different from our own. Their primary objective was to establish a faithful nation that would remain committed to God's covenant and purpose. In today's multicultural and diverse world, the prohibition on intermarriage might appear exclusionary or discriminatory. Nevertheless, it is crucial to approach these commandments with an understanding of their historical significance and the specific goals they served in their ancient context. Recognizing the uniqueness and particularity of the Israelites' role in God's plan allows us to appreciate the reasoning behind this commandment.